and my dad and mom picked us up from the Edmonton airport. We knew that we had won. We had been away for several weeks at that point, and we couldn't share it with them, obviously. We hadn't even turned the airport corner, and the first thing that my dad said was, I love my dad. We have a really good relationship, but he was like, so Uncle Gus died. Our house almost burnt down. This person died, and I was like, it was such a shock because we had, been all we had to do was eat and be stressed out when we were playing, but we didn't have all of these extra everyday lives that as Indigenous people, when we talk about constant and toxic stress, that we just are so normalized and accustomed to it. Like in medical school, 8 of my relatives died. And none of my other classmates who were non-Indigenous, whose families had been, generations of doctors, ever experienced that, maybe the death of their cat or dog or something. And so it was such a shock. And I said, Dad, don't you want to ask us how things went? Or, even though we can't tell you, do we have to talk about this? But it was such a wake-up call in reality. And really that's colonization. It's like a violent, deliberate, explosive bomb that's caused the implosion of our societies and knowledge systems. And colonial systems will not heal us and is not the answer. And for me, it's a waste of time. And I don't mean that going to get a Western education is a waste of time. It gives you the absolute essential skills and tools to be able to help and be allies and those sorts of things. But what I mean is that we have to build and rebuild those knowledge systems that have been systematically dismantled, like this puzzle, and everyone now has a little piece of that information. We have to work collectively to put that together. And so we prioritize our Indigenous languages with whatever we do. And that was the meaning of having Timakamemuk, is ensuring that that was first and foremost, and that we recognize and honor the ancestors, like my relatives, who over 100 years were forced to go to these places, which is genocide. And so when we talk about Indigenous people, we are the longest survivors of the longest ongoing genocide in the history of the world. And now that my dad is getting older, we bring him to places like this Cree language camp that's on the land, and we have fun. This is, playing Cree Battleship, and you're giving each other directions and instructions, and we get to do that together, and we get to have those fun times that he wasn't afforded to when he was a child. And he also gets to mentor his grandson, Atayokan Asini, little spirit rock, and go to places like this and be with healthy people together, learning and preserving our language. Or it's hunting season. I'm still sore because we hauled out a moose from 500 meters in the bush. I don't know if anyone does functional fitness, but that's functional fitness. And I get to see over the years, how loving he was to our family, by going out all the time and, hunting and tracking those moose and calling them, and oftentimes by himself with my grandfather, hauling that out by themselves, before there were quads, and how he would never complain about that, and how he fed us those healthy foods so that we could be strong. And it demonstrates his love. Even at 74 years old, he's still hauling these moose around. And, I, for the first time, got to do that with him, and it's so hard, right? When we talk about the importance of land-based learning, you learn about that, the moose as our third clan, which is the keeper of the laws, and related to Piesuak, the thunderbird, because it's a water animal too. And so when we talk about the medicine wheel, we say that the moose keeps the medicine wheel in its hump there, and it is the keeper of those medicines, and it teaches us all of those things. And so we have to prioritize our languages and our way of life, because they may go extinct in our lifetime. And this is what we continue to see in the media, is that Indigenous people live to be less and less old in terms of our life expectancy in spite of Western medicine. And that's when I talk about, Western colonial institutions will not heal our people, because we've had Western medicine for the past 150 years, and it's not done anything to improve our life expectancy. We have to rebuild our own medical system. And so when we were on the show, we wore these images to bring those issues forward, but also to stand in solidarity with our trans and Two-Spirit relatives and to bring attention to the Two-Spirit peoples movement, because we've always had Two-Spirit people within our nations. And you can see these many images of people from long ago, from who are in same-sex couples or trans people or non-binary people. And I think about that little boy that grew up on the reserve playing with dolls and with my cousin Butterfly and doing all of those sorts of things, that we've always had children that were different. And when we think about those star teachings, these are important star teachings. And I want to talk about the Little Dipper, which is the woman's pipe. One star in particular we acknowledge as Gisquecansqueo, which is an intersex being. It's a grandmother being that has both male and female anatomy, which is the perfect balance between feminine and masculine. And there's also the symbol of them on the land, and you can see this mountain near the Miat Hot Springs that's there, symbolizing that. So I'm going to end on this little bit about Two-Spirit issues and what we're working to address those statistics, because colonization has been very damaging, especially for our Two-Spirit and trans relatives. Where in residential school, there was only room for little boys and little girls. There wasn't any room for Tastawinoak people. And in our languages, as it's been translated from Cree to English, largely through Christianity and missionaries, we can see the word for witch in the Cree language has been translated from Gisquecansqueo, our important being that's on the land and in the sky teachings, and how it demonifies the difference of people from different diverse genders and sexualities into being something bad, which when we look at the health of our Two-Spirit and trans people, they have the highest rate of suicide. Over half of them have attempted suicide. So the key to reversing Indigenous sickness and negative health trends is to rebuild our Indigenous health systems and knowledge systems, and the answer lies here. And that's what we're doing with our grandfather, is going to these sacred sites and learning about our petroglyph teachings, which speak to us about our Indigenous health systems, which are, here's the Cree 7 stages of life as an example, and the petroglyph that explains that. And we're focusing on this part, which is the transition from childhood to adulthood, which is rites of passage. And different organizations have come to share and document what we're doing, and we'll be starting this next year. It's been a 5-year process of revitalizing those ceremonies for young and Two-Spirit trans people. Here's us at a Two-Spirit sweat at our home, where everyone is allowed to participate. Where women come and help and build as the Oskapeosak, the Oskapeosqueoak, to help to build our lodges, because we're often told, that women can't do this and women can't do that. And women are the bundle holders of our nations because we're matriarchal people. And when we think about how we say women can't do this and that, it's the imposed patriarchy that's been introduced because of the federal government. And it's putting together, working together to create these safe spaces where there's both male-identified and female-identified people, where we can have women firekeepers, because they bring those next generations to this earth life, and working with elders and ensuring that young Two-Spirit and trans people like my patient Alec here, who's transitioning from female to male, can be an Oskapeo, because this is what will help keep him strong and safe and healthy. And so we're working on rebuilding that particular ceremony to be accessible for our Two-Spirit and trans youth, where they can go out into the bush for 4 days and 4 nights and fast without food or water, and that's what builds their resilience. And when we think about that, it was really because of my Uncle Vince, who did this for us for so many years, and he passed away in the pandemic, or the year before the pandemic. So in 2020, Anthony and I had to look at each other and say, are we going to continue what he's taught us? For the past 25 years, I helped him. And we said, we have to do this. Even though it's scary, we have to go to these places where our people have always gone. There's a very particular spot in the mountain that looks like a buffalo. And when we were going there, and this was the first time that we had to do this by ourselves, and there wasn't the elders because of the pandemic, and we were nervous and scared of thinking, are we gonna do this wrong? What if we screw something up? What if we screw the song up or the pipe directions? In the middle of the sweat at nighttime after we had finished building it, and I was singing the Egiwe Tan Gamona, the going home song, the first time that I ever had to do that by myself, and having these doubts, there was this bright white light that just lit up in like here in the darkness of the sweat, that was like in the winter time when the stars are refracting the light. There's 4 points on it. And what it said was, we're so happy you're here. It's been a long time that people have come here, and we love you, and we're here to help you, and everything will be okay. And when you experience that pure love, because that's the only way that I can describe it, of our grandmothers and grandfathers and ancestors that do everything to protect us and to have a good life here on this earth, it makes you immediately cry to be in its presence. And I just want to say, you know, how are you nurturing your own spirit to burn bright so others are inspired by your light as well? Because we're just one little tiny blip in the whole Mamortausit, the great mystery, which we know are universes of universes of universes. So thank you so much for allowing me to come and share here today. And Anthony's going to come up as well. And we're gonna take off this Britney Spears thing, and I should have knives here, because like apparently she's like juggling knives right now.
Oh yeah. No, I'm just kidding. That was a good Britney nasal move. All right, is this on? Can you hear me? I don't know why I'm going after him today, because that one was really good. Okay, he's just getting started. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I hope everyone's, from what I can see, people look like they're having a good time. Hi, back there. All right, awesome. I'm just going to hop right into this. By the way, that's my Instagram handle, @ThePhoenixFox, if you want to send me a DM. I'd love it. But I'll just introduce myself. So, French-Canadian donne so hello, my name is Anthony. I'm of the French-Canadian people born for the Many Goats clan. My mom's dad is Polish, and my dad's dad is Red Streak running into Water clan. So that's how I exist as a Denef person. And all of these clans are the matrilineal heritage of my bloodlines. So it's all the women, like even my dad's dad, that's his mom, is Red Streak running into Water clan. I have a Cree name as well, which is Tawiskamga Ganibuet Maskwa Napio Nuihuin, which means standing bear man at the center of the earth. When I heard that name, I was like, what the hell is that name? Like, that is a big name, a bear in the middle of the earth that's half human. I don't even know what it means. I'm still figuring it out. But one of the things about being me that's really cool is what my mom says, I have a foot in both worlds. You know, I'm Indigenous, I have Indigenous history, I have intergenerational trauma, I'm white, I'm a settler to this land, I have, you know, shortcomings with being white, but what I can do is take the best of both of those worlds and use it to my advantage. And this idea of foot in both worlds is something that like many Native folk are like, that resonates with me. How many does that resonate with you, a foot in both worlds? Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard being Native, it's hard living in a modern society, and oftentimes it presents a conflict. On the one hand, we're wanting to remember our traditions, we're wanting to connect to our culture. On the other hand, we have bills. You know, there's careers to be had, and this can often manifest in heartbreak. This can manifest in conflict of self, conflict of identity. And one of the reasons why is if you perceive time in a colonial fashion. And a colonial fashion, time is a past, is affecting the present, and the present affects the future. It's a linear thinking, right? Which means that if you've experienced heartbreak in the past, if you've experienced challenges in the past, then it's destined for your future as well. Like, how fun is that? How easy is that kind of life? If you shift time to look at it from an Indigenous perspective, everything's happening now all at once. We're honoring our ancestors, we're living intergenerational teachings, and we're constantly becoming our best selves on behalf of the future generation. So that's one small shift you can make to help overcome that heartbreak, and it sounds beautiful and it's amazing, but the reality is that this is what time actually looks like for us, right? It's chaos. There's chaos everywhere. There's the past, there's hurt, there's pain, there's hope for the future. And so what is the solution to that? What is the solution to managing all that? Is you have to prioritize. The chaos is in our lives everywhere, all the time, and it's happening all at once. But the other side of that is that the blessings are also happening everywhere all at once. And where it matters and the way that you change this outlook is what you're perceiving in your mind, the way that you're perceiving reality, the way that you're perceiving challenges, the way that you're perceiving blessings. And what you have to do is prioritize and strategize. This is one of those foot in the both worlds thing. Native, what is our native perception on this? Oh, it'll work out. Creator will provide. That's a great thinking. But if you're having a big party, Creator's not going to provide the caterer unless you call them. You know what I mean? Like, the feast isn't going to prepare itself. You have to have a menu. You have to get groceries. You have to put all of the pieces together. So prioritization and strategy is a good thing. It's a very positive thing. And, when we're talking about healing and looking at our worlds from an Indigenous perspective, I want you to think of this. I want you to think of being a hunter. Because all of us, all Indigenous people are hunters or gatherers. If you think about life a long time ago, we had to find the animals. We had to find the berries. We had to find the food. We had to find the camp. We had to find the water. And that doesn't mean we were looking for the first time. It was remembering where those things were from the last time we camped there, from the last time we picked there. So I was recently in a ceremony with some very respectable people in Arizona, and the woman sat there. She had just completed a PhD, and she never told anyone. And she goes, by the way, the ceremony that we're having tonight is a gratitude ceremony because I'm graduating with my PhD from USC. And I was like, what? Like, University of Southern California, it's a big deal to get a PhD from there. It's a big deal to get a PhD from there as a Native American person. And so she sat in this ceremony and she kept talking about tracks. She said, I laid down tracks for myself to get here, and I'm laying down tracks for my future. So that's the beautiful part of being us, is if you perceive your life as a track that's already laid down for you, a track that you're already going after, a track that has already been, created, then all you have to do is find it. Like, how liberating is that? How comforting is it to know that instead of trying to create and generate and express this thing that is unknown and scary and questionable, you can just find what's already right for you. You can find what's already been laid down. And how do you do that? How do you do that? You have to start where your tracks begin. This is my mom. I gifted her a blanket in my living room because I had just attended a breastfeeding course. So fun fact about me is I'm the first cis male identified two-spirit Indigenous lactation counselor in North America, which is funny because if you're specific enough, you can be anything you want. Like, I'm the first over 6'3" breastfeeding counselor north of the medicine line. You know what I mean? Like, that's how ridiculous it sounds. But in this breastfeeding course, I learned about something called colostrum. Does anyone know what colostrum is? Raise your hand if you know what colostrum is. All the moms. And one dad. All right. And a dad. Good. But colostrum is called liquid gold. And it's called liquid gold because it's this super concentrated formula inside a breast that when a baby drinks it, it preps your immune system. It gives you all the nutrients you need to grow. It keeps you healthy. And the crazy thing about breastfeeding is, like, when I learned about it, I'm like, we're aliens. Because a baby's saliva will communicate to mom's nipple glands if it's sick or not, and then mom will just get cravings for food that produces the nutrients to help baby heal. I'm like, that's alien technology. Like, that's crazy. You know, it's biofeedback. But there's a minimum time frame for breastfeeding, which is 3 months. 3 months. And my mom, as a single parent, full-time worker, fed me from her chest for 3 months. And I said, Mom, I have to thank you for laying that powerful foundation for me. One time I gave her a gallon of water that had been prayed over. And I said, drink this, Mom, as a thank you for the water that you gave me inside your womb. You know, this is how intergenerational healing happens, is you have to really look at your life and be real about where it comes from. Without our moms, we don't have those tracks. Without our moms, we don't have the opportunity to walk this earth and hunt. So in order to find your way and find that path, you have to get really connected to what your life is, to how your life is going to be expressed, the way that you're going to use time on this earth. And that's why my mom says, take the best of both worlds and use it to your advantage. Use your education, use your career, use communication and prioritization and strategy, but also use traditional ways of thinking, traditional ways of perception, traditional ways of healing. And the cool part about this is that you begin to heal and you begin to uncover who you are as the process of becoming your own superhero. You know, for me, it's not an S on my chest, it's a ribbon shirt. That's my superpower. My superpower is my culture. My superpower is our ceremonies. My superpower is our communities. That's what's healed me over time, and that's what we took on to the Amazing Race. You know, James, I don't know if you know this, he's a big deal. He's one of the few Indigenous physicians in Canada. He's an advocate on the national and international level. And when we got accepted for a reality show, I was like, I don't know if we're going to do it. You know what I mean? Obama didn't do a reality show, which I compare him to Obama just so I can be Michelle. Hello. I'm the cool one. But, you know, we were like, what are we going to do? And so we asked our elders, is it okay to go on this show? Is it okay to represent our people on this show? Are we dishonoring our heritage at the risk of being edited as a caricature? And one of my teachers said, anytime that you can bring honor to our ancestors, you're bringing healing for yourself. You're bringing healing for them and the pain that they went through, and you're laying a foundation for future people to have healing and perception and belief about themselves. And so that's what we wanted to do on the show, and that's why we went on with layers of messaging. By the way, I got to do some pretty cool stuff. This is one of my favorite things, which is swimming underneath the ice at the Great Slave Lake. And I just have to show this as much as possible because I'm never going to be like a cool James Bond ever again. So this is me in my sexy spy outfit going underneath the ice. But of course, we won the show in this really triumphant moment. And the unexpected part of our win is that we made it into the international media. A friend of a friend wrote an article about us in the Washington Post where we got to talk about how, as Two-Spirit people, as gay men, as Indigenous people, our existence is politicized. There's literally a political identity from the moment that we're born as Indigenous people because of the number that we're assigned to identify our race. No other group has to do that. No other group is tracked throughout their life. Every movement, every dollar spent, every place worked. And being in the Washington Post, which is an article of note in the Western Hemisphere, was huge for us because I'm just a kid from the res. This is a geo-spiritual map of my reserve because we're very fortunate that our land base is within the bounds of our 4 sacred mountains. Those spaces that James talked about, we have similar beliefs about sacred mountains, about how they were placed upon the earth, about how we rose into this realm of being. I grew up in a small town called Keynote. It was approximately 1,500 people. And even though it was a small town, my mind was on the world as a child. My mind was on this bigger idea of life because I grew up by this place. Monument Valley, which is very famous for films. Back to the Future was shot there. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember that. Maybe there's a couple in here. You know, Back to the Future was shot in Monument Valley. This film was shot in Monument Valley, which is the iconic moment I recreated when Forrest Gump is like, I think I'll go home now, right after his long run. But life on the reserve for me was beautiful. One of my names growing up was Hushkiyashklish because I loved playing in the mud. Little mud boy is what that means. We were too poor to afford a pool, so I used to dig holes and line them with plastic and then fill them up with a hose, which when I look back at this photo now, I'm like, Mom, look at that shoulder action. Like, how did you not know I was gay in this moment? You know, because I'm like, take my picture with like my flag in the hill. I'm like, what the heck was I doing? But life was great. Growing up in family, connected to my cousin, brothers, and sisters, coming home before the sun goes down, being the only rule. As a son of Bashishchin, many goats is my clan. I could skin and butcher a sheep by myself by the time I was 8 years old. That's the level of self-sufficiency we have as Indigenous people. That's the level of attention that we give our children in a good way when we're raising them on the land. You know, but reality was difficult because it was a contrast with living in government housing. It was a contrast with welfare and food stamps for my family. One of the reasons being that my brother died of cancer 4 days after Christmas when I was 8 years old. And he battled the disease for 2 years, and we don't have socialized healthcare in the United States, so my parents had to pay. And after he died, it was like the nail in the coffin of my family. As it was, there was domestic violence, there was alcoholism, and his death really just tore our family apart. And on top of all of that, I had to come out as gay, which is the scariest experience that a queer person can go through, because it's the risk of losing your family. It's the risk of being kicked out of your home. It's the risk of being ostracized. And in our reserve, it was equally difficult because athleticism was the pinnacle of identity. If you weren't an athlete, people didn't pay attention to you. If you weren't a cowboy, people didn't pay attention to you. And I was confused because I was like, how is it that there's all this aggression on one hand, but I'm also supposed to be the super stoic native guy that wakes up before dawn and prays all day? Like, I'm like, who is that? What kind of reality is that? And in my own household, it was challenging because my father had gone to the Vietnam War. He suffered from PTSD. He worked in the construction industry, and he was just regularly like, faggots are disgusting. Gay people should die. See that guy right there? He's gay. It's disgusting. So I had that language living at home. I saw it out in the world through protesters. I saw it in media. One of the films that I watched in 4th grade was Philadelphia, which is the story of a lawyer played by Tom Hanks who is very successful, and then he gets AIDS, and then he gets fired from his high-powered job, and then he dies. So the future that I was living into as a young two-spirit man was that I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get AIDS, and I'm going to die. How sad is that? How scary is that? What a miserable future to live into. And as I became more of a man, I began to question, who am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be hot Ryan Reynolds lumberjack? Am I supposed to be a prep? Am I supposed to adopt gang life like many people did in my community? But in spite of all this, or maybe because of all this, I ended up here where I lived at Harvard. This is Eliot House. I graduated in 2009 with a degree in economics and the social anthropology of East Asia. And I thought it was my golden ticket. I thought this was my moment. I thought I was prepared for this very challenging endeavor. But instead, I ended up being in the oldest colonial institution in North America with some people who are called legacies. So does anyone recognize this young person moving in? You can see a photo of her father. If you don't know, this is a family portrait. That's Malia Obama moving into Harvard. You know, she went a couple years after me, but I went to school with like JFK's granddaughter. I went to school with the heir of the Guinness beer fortune. I went to school with the son of Larry Ellison, who developed this system called Oracle, which is a database that powers every computer system on Earth. You know, the children of billionaires. Dan Aykroyd's daughter was in my class. And meanwhile, I showed up in a taxi with 2 suitcases and the money I made at Starbucks. Who was I to think that I could be in that institution to compete? So when I finally graduated, it was relief. It was relief that I had made it. It was relief that I went on that journey. And again, I thought it was the golden ticket. You know, I thought I was Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, going to inherit the kingdom. I was going to keep the secret for everlasting gobstoppers. You know what I mean? But what happened is reality took a turn. The housing market crashed, the stock market crashed, and I was just overwhelmed with disappointment. I felt like a failure. I had anxiety. There was grief. Why? Why did this happen to me? Why did this have to happen to my family? Why do Indigenous people suffer so much? So much pain, so much anger, so much frustration about the reality I had to inhabit every day, that oftentimes it felt like I was drowning, like there was no air, like I couldn't get above the surface, like there wasn't an opportunity for me to breathe. And I'm bringing this up because when you think of a hunter, hunters are adaptable. This sounds familiar, right? Another stock market crash, COVID, the environment failing. All of these quote unquote once in a lifetime experiences are happening regularly. So what we need to do is remember the adaptability of our ancestors, because it's critical. Adaptability is critical now. It's not an option. It's not a, it might be nice. It is a critical issue to be adaptable in these challenging times. And how do you do that? How do you find adaptability? Again, it's about perception. A breakdown in your life is an opportunity for a breakthrough. And conversely, when there's a breakthrough, when there's a breakdown, it's an opportunity for breakthrough. So any challenge that you have isn't a real challenge, it's practice for that superhero. It's practice for you removing another layer that is in the way of your greatness. And how does that start? It starts in your emotions. You have to process what you feel. You have to get it out. You have to cry. You have to yell. You have to run. You have to scream. You have to Sundance. You have to pray. You have to smudge. You have to talk to elders. You have to do all of that, because if you keep it in, you drown. If you keep it in, you stay stuck. Processing is the beginning of adaptability. I learned this the hard way. I had to learn, how is this young boy going to be a man? And it was challenging because the world that we live in that's projected at us expects really big things. Expects mansions and Teslas and Lamborghinis and world traveling and head-to-toe Gucci. And it's not just a one-time thing that we receive. It's a message that's broadcast at us 24/7 through the internet, through the news cycle, through advertising. Like, there's a lot of pollution out there in your mind. There's a lot of pollution that's projected at you. And the craziest part is that the people who make technology use the same tools that Las Vegas casinos use to keep people trapped in the casino. You can learn all about it in this film called The Social Dilemma. I highly recommend you watch it. It's a documentary. But yeah, Vegas is in your pocket, keeping you addicted. Colors on your phone are designed to be super saturated, so there's a pleasure release in your brain every time you look at the screen. You can change it to grayscale if you want to, but just think about that. This idea of tracking who you are, tracking your eyes, tracking your identity is coming all the time. And that doesn't mean there aren't important things in the world, like the protests around race, like the fires in Australia, like the continued assault on our rights, such as what happened in the fisheries of the East Coast, such as COVID, such as anxiety about the future. There's so much anxiety about the environment that psychologists have developed a new term called eco-anxiety. It's a normal thing. It's a normal part of life now. It doesn't mean it's not important, but what it is if you perceive it as mental noise, you're able to identify how to cope with it. Why is it important to identify what it is? In my life, I had a lot of mental noise about who I am, about my past, about my future, about the possibilities that are available to me. And because I wasn't dealing with them, because I wasn't processing them, they showed up as depression and anxiety. And my depression manifested itself as drug use. I was a meth addict for 10 years. And even though on Instagram it looked like I was living an awesome life in San Francisco and Brooklyn and New York City, what people didn't see is that I put myself in the ICU twice on the brink of death, watching my heartbeat go from 25 beats a minute to 160 beats a minute in the span of 5 minutes. That's not normal. That is not a good place to be. And in those moments of death, all I wanted to feel was the sun on my face. I wanted to feel the wind against my skin. I wanted to see my mom and my family again. And how was it that I was trapped in this place? Because I didn't feel love. I didn't feel connection. I didn't have meaning or purpose in my life. I didn't have a sense of worth or acknowledgement. And it's so easy for our people to feel this because these are the environments we grow up in. My dad just died in a house that looked almost exactly like this. 20 people in a 3-bedroom home. No food, no running water, gangs, violence, alcoholism, aggression. Like it's coming at us even from within our own communities. So what is there to do? What worked for me was a journey of self-discovery, a journey of looking within, a journey of looking at that past, of looking at those emotions, of looking at the way my identity had formed itself. And they really came into focus when I started going back to ceremony. This is me taking down a teepee, which is an adopted structure for many Navajo people, after 10 years of not going. And in this moment, in this experience, what I was reawakened to are the teachings of our ancient philosophies. I don't like the term medicine wheel because I feel it very reductive. It's a 2-dimensional object. Instead, I like to think of a medicine sphere, an interconnected ecosystem of belief and interconnection. And a medicine wheel is just a CAT scan image of a piece of it. But in this one, as Diné people, we talk about Nsahakes, your thoughts, the white part towards the east as the sun comes up, giving rise to Nahata, a plan. That when you put it in action during the day when the sky is blue, when you go home at night, your life is unfolding. Your family is unfolding. So when the sun goes down and the sky is yellow, you have that sense of peace. You have that sense of home. So when sky is dark and the stars are out, say Hasin, you have pride, you have determination, that you have wood to get you through the night, that you have a home to protect you, that you have another day and another sun to have a new thought and a new prayer that you say when you greet the day every morning. And the most important part is in Sahakes, that thinking, that moment of when the sky is clear, when the sun comes up. Because thinking is the basis of our resiliency. Because when you can think about who you are, you have a self-identity and you have self-respect and you protect who you are. And that's the foundation of resiliency. And resiliency in oneself manifests into resiliency through the people, through spirituality, through community. So when I know who I am because I'm connected to a bigger purpose, to something that's bigger outside of me, a bigger time frame, a bigger universe, a bigger earth, a bigger life, then I bring that into my community. And I share that with the people that I love and that matter to me. The way that I've learned how to connect is through toucha, sweat, which I've been doing since a very young age. And I'm very fortunate to pray with people from different backgrounds. And Matotsan and Hamblecha, different nations have taken me in to teach me their ways. But it's sweating which has been the most beneficial because it's a physical cleansing. There's physical benefits to sweating. But one of the things that our elders say is that when you put those rocks inside that lodge, after they've been heating up in a fire, you're activating ancient knowledge. And when you're arranging the rocks in the pit, you're rearranging the stars, because that's where we come from. And the stars, if you think about it, are actually like neurological pathways. They're like brain cells. And we're rearranging those rocks, we're rearranging our mind. We're rearranging insahakes. We're getting that thinking straight again. And we're centering within ourselves between the earth and the sky. And through our songs and our teachings and our prayers and our language, we're connected to a wider universe. And it's in the sitting of this macro experience, focusing on the micro is when you identify all of the thoughts that are happening, the feelings that are happening, how pain is manifesting in your body. And then the important part is naming it. Naming what you're feeling, naming why it happened, naming what you want to be feeling. Because you have to name the beast in order to tame it. It's like in that film, The Conjuring, like he couldn't banish the evil spirit until he knew the name was Valak. There's power in the name because it creates awareness in your life. And awareness is the center point for action. When you have awareness, you can take action. When you have awareness, you can heal. When you have awareness, you can create in a way that you can't create otherwise. And that's the essence of being a hunter. When you're out on the land, you have to know what kind of land are you walking on? What is the incoming weather? What kind of animals are in this place? Do the animals smell good? Can they hear good? What is their weakness? Because every creature has a weakness that you can exploit. So to sum it up, I just want all of you to know that this lives inside of you. It lives in each and every single one of us, but we have to access that. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to hone our skills. And in doing so, you get to create in the present moment by healing our ancestors and by thinking about the future generations. That's the essence of that time shift. That's the essence of that shift in perception, is that you get to aware and awaken your own inner superhero. And find the track. Find it. And once you find it, don't lose it. Maintain it. Take care of it. Love it. My elders tell me when you pray, it's not just an idle word out there. Your words speak something into existence, and then it's a little baby. So do you just go from a sperm and an egg to a fully formed human? No. There's all stages of development before the baby even comes out. And then when the baby comes out, there's more stages until development. And that's why all these elders are like, oh, I'm still learning. I don't know anything. It's like, okay, you're so smart and old. Like, you know a lot. But that's it. They're talking about, I'm always developing. I'm always growing. I'm always seeking. I'm always honing my awareness. So Indigenous values that you can take is know who you are and be proud of it. Thank you. Go out there.
He's drinking water. Okay. I thought he was gonna tell the story of like when we first started going out hunting, and we killed a moose with my dad, and he's like, who do you want to skin it, like me or James? And my dad's like, you. He pointed to Anthony.
No, because James was holding this really sharp hunting knife. He's like, Dad, who do you want to skin the animal? He's like flinging around this like really sharp knife that I bought.
I was not doing that.
That's totally what he was doing. And then his dad was like, him. And then I was like, yes, I'm in.
Or my dad was like low-key giving me shade this past weekend because he was not there. And he's like, yeah, if Anthony was here, he could have hauled both of these on his back, and we would have been out of here in half the amount of time. I'm like, sorry, Dad, sorry.
Yeah.
But we'd love to take questions if anyone has any questions or comments or things like that. Awesome.
Yes. In the back there. Oh, cool. Yeah, that was really fun. Actually, it was kind of funny because we were like almost in last place at that point.
We were in last place.
We were in last place. We thought we were going to get eliminated. And like one of the things that we do as Navajo people, when we sweat in the winter time, we roll in the snow. And so we do that here too. And the reason behind that is they say it's activating your immunity system. So the first snow, we go roll in it. So when we were going to that lake and we were in last place, they had all this safety gear that that you saw me wearing. And I was like, just let me go in. Just let me go in. I do this all the time. And they're like, you could die. But yeah, it was a really beautiful blue. The blue on the bottom in the photo looks black, but it was actually this really deep blue that I've never seen before, and it was incredible. Yeah, beautiful country. Any other questions? Yeah. Any other questions? Yep. Look at me. This is the visibility.
That's a tame version of you're wearing black and white today. Okay.
I'm low key right now.
I think it's really being fully and authentically who we are, unapologetically, everywhere we go. And we can only do that with, the support of our family and parents and relatives who uplift us and support us. Like I remember when I came out, and like one of the ways that my dad coped with that is by telling all of his brothers and sisters right away. And I was like, this isn't your decision to share or your information to share. But right away my boy cousins were like, if anyone messes with him, we'll beat them up. Like the typical like, we'll get after them. And I think that it was so important, right, to have that support. Like I don't think they would go beat people up. I'd hope not. Maybe like push them around or something. I don't know. But and I think in being who we are, that's what connected with so many people, is just being like, it's okay for me to have purple hair or pink hair or whatever it is, however you want to express yourself, and saying that it's a sense of safety. And in the medical community, also like sharing that message with other physicians and doctors and nurses who can create a sense of safety for patients from all backgrounds too.
Yeah. Has everyone seen the movie Selena? Anyone? Everyone's seen it? Remember the scene when he's like, you got to be more Mexicans than the Mexicans. You have to be more American than the Americans. Like, that's what it feels like to be Two-Spirit. Like, one of our friends, we had a talking circle at our house, and they said, double the spirits, double the work. And so, I mean, like, visibility, first of all, as I shared a little bit about my journey, it had to be found, right? Because for the longest time, I was invisible. So the process of visibility is lots of self-work, lots of self-development, questioning, and then just getting to a point for lack of a better term, of just being like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. I don't care about my past. Like, even my meth use, I wouldn't talk about it because I was afraid of judgment, because I was afraid of rejection. And like, honestly, if you judge and reject me for that, that's your problem. That's not my problem. That's your problem. And so, you know, like, so there's that process of self-discovery, but then there's also the process of proving yourself. You know, like, when we go to ceremonies, we're chopping wood, we're helping with the pipe, we're smudging people, we're making sure people are sat, and then we're in the kitchen cooking food. Like, you know, when I walk into a kitchen, the ladies are kind of like, because I'm like, what's going on here? Where's the food at? Are we going to get that peeled? And I just start working. You know what I mean? And so what that does is it allows us to be in a place within ourselves and within the community where when we show up, we're just seen. And then when we speak, people listen to us. And it's not about saying, I'm right. It's about saying, hey, that's a non-binary person. Why are you making them wear a skirt? You know what I mean? Or like, have you ever noticed how you're really homophobic and you make people feel uncomfortable? You know, and those are really difficult places to be, because the other side of that is we're talked about and we're gossiped about and we're not welcomed in some circles. And that's okay. That's their loss, because we're going to go have our own little queer community where everyone is welcome, and the vibe in that space is going to leave them feeling more empowered than going somewhere else. So the visibility is really, it's double the work. It's double the work because it's about dealing with our own identities and who we are, but it's also about having to prove ourselves as well, especially when you hold a knife like that.
I like do surgical assisting, you know, and I don't know where he's getting this idea that I hold a knife like that.
He's like, 10 cc's, stop. You were holding the knife like that.
Hold the knife.
Any other questions? Anyone? Anyone? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I just make sure our price point is worth it. Number one. I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question, commodification of identity, because the thing is, like, if you don't have an identity, then you think it's a commodity. And I think that's part of the whole issue, is that, you know, when folks don't know what it's like to be Black and have a very, you know, a part of your identity be about hair or even shades of skin tone, if people don't know what it's like to be Indigenous and have a strong connection to land, or if people don't know what it's like to be an immigrant or, you know, a different ability of body, then it's just like a thing, right? It's not an ingrained piece of your being. And I think the whole conversation around diversity is about getting to a point where people don't see it as a thing, and they actually say, wow, this is one facet of a very complex identity for you, and it's not my job to just say that piece of you is welcomed, but all of you is welcomed and important. And how do we do that? I don't know. I don't know how we do that. One of the things that I ask myself about the United States and Canada in particular is, what piece of our culture is a centering ceremony where we just sit around and talk and know each other and are able to see our humanity? Because when you're in a fasting ceremony and you're a Sundance, you see people's humanity when they're on like day 3 of no food and water. You know what I mean? Like, you see their identity and you see their spirit, and there's a different way of relating to that person. Whereas in Canadian society, like, what makes us Canadian? Is it, you know, is it the national anthem? Is it the Pledge of Allegiance in the United States? Like, where is that moment where people are centered? And that's not to say there aren't centering activities like hockey. You know, people for reconciliation, my reconciliation act is wearing an Oilers hat because I like talk to white folk like I've never talked to them before. Like I'm like, oh wow, like I'm just sparking conversations left and right with my Oilers hat. But again, I didn't know that. You know, but what is that centering process where we're able to connect and see the spirit of humanity? And I think not having that is why identity is often commodified.
And I think, I'm just going to add to that, really, I think what your question is asking about active allyship versus performative allyship. And everyone can wear a rainbow flag and like show up for pride. But, you know, right now in North America, trans rights are extremely under threat to the point where in the United States there's over like 200 anti-trans bills, whereas as a physician who provides trans-affirming care and provides hormone replacement therapy to the trans community, which is extremely underserviced, that I could be put in jail for that. Or, you know, recently there was a woman in San Francisco who had a store and she hung up a rainbow flag and she was killed for that. And so this is a level of violence that, you know, when we talk about the progression of society and consciousness and human rights, it's reversing. And we need regular people who are allies to stand in solidarity and with us, not only on those issues, but Indigenous issues too. The word for visitor in Cree is umanto, which is the kind, holy, revered person. And it's that that ideology that we welcomed our relatives here to come and have and experience peace. And that's the teaching of Turtle Island, is for us as Native people to invite all families of the world to come here and experience peace and to remember who they are and where they are in creation. And that's what we continue to do with our Titigaona, our ceremonies. And that's how we agreed and engaged into Kitsia Surtamwin, the Great Promise or Treaty, is to live here in peace and friendship and harmony. And for the most part, Indigenous people have maintained our aspect of that, and we're waiting for our treaty partners and our, you know, settler relatives to remember their agreement and what their ancestors did too, which is found in our oral understanding and interpretation of our treaty.
I was just in a ceremony and the elder was talking about treaty, and he's like, oh, a lot of people say treaties in the past. But if you look at the language of treaty, it's long as the sun shines, the waters grow, the grasses, waters flow, grasses grow, and as long as they're native people. And he's like, I'm looking outside, the sun's still shining, like the water's still flowing. So it's still an active thing. It's still happening and unfolding. And I think, again, the centering ceremony is like the newcomers never got on board with treaty. There was never that moment of the learning exchange, except when we were helping them survive because they had like scurvy and were practicing cannibalism. Like, you know what I mean? Like we helped people learn the land and grow food and build the right kind of houses. But the education about inclusion and diversity and all of that was never adopted. You know, and so that's what we have to get to as a nation, is figuring out a way to heal that. I'm like, clicker drop. No. I would drop the headset, but it's on my head. Any other questions?
Great.
Yes, one more.
So,
like what? Yeah.
I think there's
just pull out your Brittany knives. And What'd you say?
I think there, I think there's a few ways of addressing that. So one of the ones that we've learned is to work with really kind and loving elders who are open, even if they might not know teachings about diverse genders and sexualities or two-spirit teachings. They know a lot of our other teachings, and they can correct elders of their peer cohort that we can't correct. And, you know, there'll be those aunties and uncles that will stand beside young people and stick up for them and say, you know, what happened is not right, and this is not part of our teachings. And the other part is sometimes we have to do that ourselves too, which can be uncomfortable. But going back to the language and knowing our language, so as an example, women can't be fire keepers. We've heard that a lot for people that come to our sweats and our ceremonies. And I ask them, like, go be the fire keeper. And they're like, I can do that? And I'm like, well, why can't you? And they're like, well, I'm a woman, I can't. I've been told that I can't, you know, from elders. And I said, the way that I'm taught from my aunts and uncles and grandparents is looking at our language and saying, the word for isquel is, the word for woman in Cree is isquel, which is related to iskoteo. The women actually say inkweme, like I'm related to you, because they bring those little soul flames from Sky World. And they also have isquatem, the doorway that we all come through, which is the doorway of a woman. And so I said, how could you not look after the fire when it's literally in the language and translation and interpretation of all of these things? And people need to remember where those can't is coming from, which is largely from, you know, religious ideologies that our people are interpreting and internalizing as our own. And so as two-spirit people who are, you know, feminine and masculine, we challenge that all the time, where we don't fit into that box, and we're in the kitchen and we're helping and we're like, you know, building the lodges and stuff like that. And so people have to pause and think, like, are we going to tell them to stop? Like, they're helping with everything, you know? And I think that's the biggest gift of two-spirit people, is that fluidity and the ability to really, when we put our minds to it, do whatever it is that we want to do with the support of our communities that allow us to be in those positions that we used to be in and where we rightfully deserve to be in.
Yeah. I also think this is like a foot in both worlds situation where, you know, so like in my pastime, I've spent a lot of time researching the rise of white supremacy, and it's actually coordinated and organized and funded. You know, like there are people who meet in the desert and they do military drills, you know, and then these are the same folks that like bust up a drag brunch. So to sit and think that, you know, the law is written and it's set and it's gonna be like that forever, we can't necessarily know that's true, because if you look in the United States, the overturning of Roe versus Wade has really fundamentally altered women's rights and access to healthcare. And the way that it's working is that the conservative people in Canada take cues from the conservative folks in the United States, and they're often funded by the same people. And so this, you know, this racism, homophobia, all of these things, it's funded and it's organized and it's coordinated. And so we have to take those same approaches on our own side as well. And that's something that Native people have done since the beginning. Like, we've always been organized and we've always been coordinated. And that's one of the reasons why many of us are still here. You know what I mean? It's just doing things in a different way. So for example, one of my teachers talked about having a vessel. What is the vessel for change that you're using? And she created a land trust in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, which in the span of, 8 years, did she say? She's fundraised $8 million, had like all of this land donated into federal trust, which is basically reserve land, because she started a nonprofit entity and a legal system for that land back to happen, you know? And so again, prioritization and strategy are important, because that's what's going to allow us to navigate the very tricky world of a settler mindset, right? Which is about, and which is really coming from, you know, capitalism, and really comes from Rome. Like, it comes from the Roman Empire. Like, that's how old it is. Any other questions? Want to see another dance move with my knives? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
See ya.
We're moving on to our coffee break now, and there's a coffee shop by Cornerstone if you want to go check it out. And can we please get another round of applause for our keynote speakers today? Thank you very much.